Where's my gavel?
Was there.
Oye, está abajo.
I don't know who did
No me lo
it.
esconda.
It just happened. Okay, sir.
Okay. No me lo esconda, mira para ti, Juan. This is for Juan. Ladies and gentlemen of the audience, this is for Juan. Esa mentira, Juan. No te lo voy a aventar. Good afternoon. Study session, Mayor and City Council meeting, 4 p.m. Wednesday, July 3rd, 2019, City Hall Complex. I call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk, please.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Number 3, presentation. We're going to start with number 1, presentation proposal changes to the floodplain ordinance. And this will be done by John Hayes, Santa Cruz County. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Don't mind, I'll go through this and try to be as brief as possible because I know you have a rather full agenda already. Just to kind of go over things very quickly, where we are in the ordinance history. Santa Cruz County's had several incarnations of its floodplain management ordinance over the years, the most recent of which was passed in May of 2001. It was created not only to address the minimum requirements of the state of Arizona and the federal government, but also to look at getting the county into the community rating system program to receive a discount for flood insurance policies for those people who are in the floodplain in unincorporated Santa Cruz County and were having to get flood insurance. We initially entered into the program as a Class 7 community, which gave us a 15% discount on flood insurance premiums. Unfortunately, we're now at 10 because of changes in the growth within the county, basically going to almost 0. We lost our growth factor adjustment, which is a multiplier of 1.4 that brought us down, unfortunately, to an 8. We're working on trying to get that back, but it's not there right now. Basically, since 2008, we've been aware that we've needed to make some changes and modifications to the existing ordinance. Part of this was due to the fact that originally when written, the ordinance was primarily aimed at the areas of unincorporated Santa Cruz County. It did not have any bearing over the incorporated areas of Nogales or Patagonia. When the city abdicated its responsibilities to the county in 2004, this created some unintended consequences that some of the things that the ordinance was designed to prevent now were within our jurisdiction of having happened. And this created some unintended consequences for some of the property owners within the city. So we began the process to update the ordinance, and in 2011, we did a study session with the Board of Directors of the Flood Control District to tell them what we were proposing for changes, that we wanted to take this out for a public review and comment period. The board decided at that point that they would rather have a committee go over the ordinance, and they constituted a 9-person committee that was to be balanced between the city and the county, and balanced also between builders and environmentalists. The committee worked for a number of years, coming up with a final recommendation in late 2014. However, once that was put together, the changes were put on hold at that point. In 2017, the state of Arizona and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, notified us that there were some changes now that needed to be made because they were now deficiencies within our ordinance, mostly due to changes that have been made both in federal law and state law. So we took the draft that was compiled originally by the committee and used that as a starting point for what is now the current draft. So I'll briefly go through some of the changes and try to focus on some of the changes that will hopefully benefit the residents of the city of Nogales. Section 1.3, we added 2 subsections in there just basically to indicate that part of the reason we are managing our floodplains the way we are is to get the greatest discount for flood insurance rates as possible for the residents of the county, And also K says to protect, preserve, and maintain the natural beneficial functions of the floodplain associated with riparian habitat. This was actually stuck in part because of some recent changes that have happened with federal grant opportunities. Some of the grants are now giving extra unofficial points for consideration on federal grants if your project is trying to maintain the natural and beneficial functions of natural systems. So by putting this in there, we hope to be able to show that we're trying to do that with our projects and earn some of those points and get some of these grant projects funded, like the Ephraim Canyon Basin. Section 2 is actually where the largest number of changes actually occurred within the ordinance. This was the pages upon pages of definitions that were added at the request mostly of the ordinance committee to try to better define what some of the terms in the ordinance are. A couple of them I just want to highlight real quick. One is abandoned structure. Under the existing ordinance, a structure is considered abandoned if its use is discontinued for a period of 12 months consecutive. This leads into the potential unintended consequence that a storefront downtown, because the property owner cannot find a retail business to occupy that storefront for a period of a year, could be considered abandoned. And that is not the intent of the ordinance. The intent is for the use of the structure to be abandoned by the owner. So we've added in there at the suggestion of the committee that we add in the idea that the building is not being maintained and the taxes are not being paid on the property as well. Accessory structure is one that we've added in to reflect a change at the federal level that not all buildings now have to have a floodplain use permit. When I first started doing floodplain management back in the early to mid-90s, federal law stated that any structure built in the floodplain didn't matter if it was a mansion or a shack, a tough shed or a little outhouse, had to have a floodplain use permit. About 4 or 5 years ago, the feds began backing off of that, and 2 years ago, they officially said that communities can make that decision for themselves, that small accessory structures do not need a floodplain use permit. We've decided to go with the requirement that we have in our building department codes, which is anything that's smaller than 200 square feet will not require a floodplain use permit. The other one, which is probably one of the major ones for the city, is life of structure. Right now, under the current ordinance for what we call the 50% rule, this is a rule that's at the federal level that says that if you do 50% of the value of a structure in terms of repairs, upkeep, or modifications, the structure must be brought into full compliance with the current mapping and ordinance. Right now, under the existing code, that is in perpetuity. There is no sunset clause in that. When we wrote this initially, that was the requirement to get the maximum amount of points in the CRS program. The program has since backtracked on that and said that to get maximum points, all you need is a 10-year period. So what we're proposing to do is change the idea of the life of structure to 10 years if the structure maintains its original exterior footprint, either from the date of the mapping, which is December 2nd, 2011, or if it was constructed after that from the date it was constructed. If the building, however, expands its footprint horizontally, then it would remain in perpetuity, because the last thing we want is to create a larger and larger exposure to hazard within the floodplain.
Mayor, can I ask that?
Go ahead.
What, I'm confused. And horizontally?
Yes, sir.
So how do you make that 50%? Vertically?
What we're talking about is changing the footprint of the building.
Okay.
So if you expand either sideways or front to back on the building, you're expanding the footprint horizontally. So you're going from this way. Vertically is an issue that we can argue with EMA for right now. Our stance is that if you're well above the floodplain, the stuff you're doing vertically above isn't, as long as the first floor isn't going to collapse during the flood, what you're doing up there really should not be considered part of the building. It's in the floodplain.
Yeah, Yeah, sure. So if you have a 10,000 square foot building, but you're just gonna change the inside, then you don't have to go through the FEMA deal, or?
No, sir. Let me give you an example on this. About 10 years ago, in fact, it'll be 10 years ago next month, the Jack in the Box downtown went through a major renovation, major remodel. It did not change its exterior footprint, but it did go through a major remodel. That left only about $20,000 on the value of the building before that building has to be brought into full compliance. Under the current mapping, full compliance would require that building to be elevated between 6 and 7 feet above ground. If the ordinance as drafted goes through, when that 10-year window hits, or that 10-year anniversary hits, they can go ahead and their value on the building resets, and they can then go through. You still have to go through the permitting process, but they're allowed to reset the value of the building at that 10-year anniversary and do more work to it.
Oh, okay. Now I understand.
Okay. And then the other one is a definition for minor work to try to clarify that certain normal and or routine maintenance or repairs or upkeep for a structure does not require a floodplain use permit. One of the concerns brought forth by the ordinance committee was that as the ordinance is currently written, we could, if we wanted to, require that somebody has to get a floodplain use permit if they paint the building, if they change the carpets, if they have to fix a broken window. And that's by no means the intent of the ordinance. So we added a definition in there to try to help clarify that this is not the intent. Section 4 of the ordinance, which deals with primarily who has the authority to basically run the ordinance, run the flood control district, who has the authority for the permitting, the permits requiring the conditions. That was basically just reorganized for the most part to put it into a more logical order. The order it was in kind of was randomized, and so you were talking about permits before you're talking about who has the authority to issue the permits, and then before who has the authority to actually be the person that has that authority. The only other thing that we did include in there is going back to the idea of minor work, some language talking about how the minor work on a structure that doesn't expand the footprint, that is below a certain cost threshold, does not require, or is being required by the utility company to be done. So one of the things that we have to do a permit for right now all the time is Unisource comes in, shuts somebody's power down because their utility box, their meter is too old, and they have to go get a brand new one, and now I have to do a permit for that. This is to get rid of that requirement so that they can just do it because they're being required by the utility company. It's not a repair, it's not a structural change that that the owner has decided to make. Section 5.1C6 was added, and this is going to have more effect outside the city, but it can have an effect inside the city with pre-existing non-conforming structures. It's dealing with an issue with the garages that we've had over the last few years. Generally speaking, the garage, as I can show here, a garage typically built where it's a step down. If a new house is built and it's built in accordance with the floodplain requirements in the floodplain, the lowest floor of the house has to be at what we call the regulatory flood elevation, which is 1 foot above the base flood elevation. The garage, by definition, can be below this because it is an area that is used for parking, storage, or building access. The issue we've been having in part is we have people who, within a few months of moving into the house, they enclose the garage and turn it into living space. Unfortunately, because FEMA discounts for flood insurance for being elevated above the floodplain are based on the number of whole feet you are rounded down to the nearest whole foot, when they enclose a garage into living space, those people are losing their flood insurance discounts because they've dropped their floor. The other issue we have is one with the state of Arizona, where the state of Arizona wants us to require that any area that is enclosed below the regulatory flood elevation have the openings that are required by FEMA for areas that are below the base flood elevation. One of the ramifications of that would be all garages that are below this elevation, the regulatory elevation, would have to have openings in them, but those openings have to meet the federal requirements according to the state. And the federal requirements are the top of the openings can be no higher than the base flood elevation. Which, how do you have openings higher than the base flood elevation if the floor is higher than the base flood elevation? It's nonsensical, and it's something that we've gone round and around with the state on, but they're not willing to budge on this. So we came up with two options. Option one, which is proposed in the ordinance, is to require for residential structures that do have an attached garage, that the attached garage will become the point that we take the measurement from. So the attached garage has to be at the regulatory elevation. So it would either be at the same level as the floor of the house, or they'd have a step up in the floor. This does not get anybody any additional discounts on their flood insurance premiums. That would protect people that enclose their garages from having their flood insurance premiums suddenly skyrocket on them. And it gets rid of the issue of the openings. But if they choose to have their garage floor at the same elevation, it's a moot point. The other option, when we presented this to the Board of Supervisors, one of the supervisors asked us, why not just require everybody to go up an additional foot with their floor in the floodplain? And so that's the other option that we're asking the public for their comment on. This actually has the benefit of, if you go up an additional foot, you will save a little bit of additional funds on your flood insurance premiums. If you're in a zone A, E, AH, or AO, that savings is probably on the order of a couple of $100 a year max. If you're in an A zone, though, that savings is over $1,000 a year. This is for a house with a $200,000 coverage on it. And that's because in the straight A zone, which is actually the most common floodplain in all of the county, you don't get discounts for elevation until you're a minimum of 2 feet above the base flood elevation. So we're putting this out there, asking the public to comment back on this. The comment forms that we have actually has a poll question for the public to give us an answer on that, which way they would prefer to go.
A zones are in the city of Nogales?
There are some A zones in the city of Nogales. Most of the floodplain in the city of Nogales, however, is AE zone. And most of the area that is floodplain is already built out in the city. Most of the unnumbered A zone that you will find in the city is going to be in the Monte Carlo, not Monte Carlo, Meadow Hills area, on some of the tributaries to Truro Creek.
Thank you.
Some other changes that we made is C7 was added to clarify what the requirements for accessory structures that do require floodplain use permit will be. So these are going to be those structures that are larger than 200 square feet in size. And they're pretty much the same as the general standards that were already in the ordinance for similar types of areas, but we just gave it its own special location. 5.5J3 was added to try to reduce some of the past increases in discharge. Right now, under the current ordinance, any new commercial or industrial development that comes in has to do mitigation of the amount of water runoff that they're going to create. So when a lot is undeveloped, there's a certain amount of water when it rains that's going to run off. That we can calculate that. The idea is that when the lot is constructed, all the buildings are constructed, the parking lots are constructed, we don't want more water running off, because over time that means that you have larger flood events. This is kind of what we've seen as Mexico has developed over time. What we've added here is just the requirement that when developments that are already existing that never had to meet this requirement, if they come in for a redevelopment, that they have to provide some degree of retention to back off what they have right now by about 10%. Section 5.5, J6 and J7 were simply added to reflect what's already been standard practice in the district for almost the last 20 years. J6 is regarding detention systems. We require people that are putting in new detention systems that they use best management practices such as rain garden techniques to increase the amount of water that's going to infiltrate into the ground, decrease the amount of time water sits at the surface. We're just adding this into the code instead of having to just tell people that this is our standard practice. J7 is what we do for developments that are less than 1 acre in size, that they have the option of using a rain garden, and we have a brochure on the rain garden based on how much area you have. You have to provide so much acreage for a rain garden, and it allows them to do their detention without having to go and hire an engineer to design a system for them. And generally speaking, I cannot speak for the city planning and zoning department, but in the county, we have an agreement with the county planning and zoning that the rain garden areas, the water harvesting areas that they do, will count towards their landscaping requirements as well. So they're able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. 5.5M was added to reflect changes in the requirements for riparian habitat, though there's almost no riparian habitat to speak of within the city. But this is just basically to show that most of the requirements that we have in the existing ordinance under riparian habitat are really meant for new developments, not the existing platted developments. Section 5.8 is modified. This is one of the ones that has a fairly significant impact in the city. This is the rules that we have based on the floodway. When the ordinance was written in 2000 and 2001, the county had very few, if any, buildings that were in the federally mapped floodways. And so it was a very simple thing for us to do at that time to say there will be no construction or fill allowed in the floodway areas. With the remapping and the city's abdication, we all of a sudden found ourselves in a situation where we have a fair number of buildings in the floodway. And with the current ordinance, if something happens to those buildings, they cannot be rebuilt, period, end of statement, end of discussion. There's no appeal for that. So what we've done is we've looked at it and we've talked it over with the CRS people, and we believe that this requirement will meet the requirement to benefit those people who, through no fault of their own, are in the floodway. And the idea is that if they're mapped into the floodway, then as of the new mapping, then those buildings will have an exemption that they can be rebuilt if they're damaged or destroyed, and that triggers the 50% rule. But they're going to have to be rebuilt in such a manner that they're open on the bottom and let the water move through. But those, as long as they stay within the original footprint of the building at the time it was damaged or destroyed. So if you have like the Elks Club downtown when it had its fire, if that fire had been worse, under the current mapping, it probably would not have been allowed to have been rebuilt. Under the new mapping, it would, and assuming that it did not have ways around the 50% rule that we were able to find with some of the code violations that it had for the city's building department and the fire department, then it would have had the opportunity to build up but have that first floor open for parking, building access, or storage, and let the floodwaters move through it and still be rebuilt. So the idea, in addition, what this will hopefully do is in those areas where we do have a high density of buildings in the floodway, over time, as buildings end up becoming elevated for whatever reason, that this will actually give a more efficient flow path for the water and actually help to reduce those flood elevations over time.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
May I ask? Mr. Hayes, so getting back to the example of the Elks Club or the downtown Nogales area, Morley and Grand area, if a building is completely destroyed, then that means that they would have to go up for the first floor, and how high up would they have?
It would depend on where you're at in along Morley. There are some areas where it's only about 2 feet. There are some areas where it's about 7 feet. So it really depends on where you're at. And this is not including the remapping that we're looking at based on actually having real hydrology and hydraulics done in Mexico, which hopefully, as a side, the preliminary indications are we might be able to reduce the discharge of the Nogales Wash by about 20%.
And who's doing that still?
It's a contractor in Tucson called CMG Drainage.
And if it turns out favorable, it will help those businesses
Yes, sir.
on Morning if it was destroyed, the building.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Turco.
Mayor, Mr. Hayes, again, the downtown buildings, what are they doing in Mexico that's gonna go ahead and help?
To be honest, I have no clue. I know that they built some detention basins in the upper portions of the watershed. And the last meeting I went to with the Army Corps of Engineers and the IBWC regarding those, most of them had filled up with sediment, and several of them, when they went back to go try to clean them out, had squatters build houses on them, and now they cannot clear those houses out, so they cannot put those basins back in. So I honestly have no clue what they will be able to do on their side to make things better for us.
Is there any other business area in the city of Nogales, like let's just say Mariposa, that if a building is completely destroyed, that they would have to go up?
Yes, sir. To a degree, most of Grand Avenue is like that right now. There are some buildings like, for example, the Alex Tires building. If that was destroyed, it would not even be allowed to be reconstructed. It's totally in the floodway. It's not even in a flood. It doesn't even have an island around it. Some of the buildings in downtown, we were able to, with the mapping, we were able to create islands around the buildings so the buildings could be rebuilt. But there are some warehouses along Grand Avenue that they don't have that, and so if something happens to them, they're gone. They're just plain gone right now.
And there's no appeal?
There's no appeal under the way the current ordinance is written. Under the section for variances and appeals, it specifically says there is no variance for floodways.
Also, you have to be on the floodway.
If you're in the floodway. In terms of buildings that if they're damaged, they have to be elevated, probably the worst part is Villa Verde right now. There's some places in Villa Verde where the floodwaters will be on the order of 12 to 14 feet deep. So you're talking 13 to 15 feet of elevation for a house if it's destroyed.
So Hector, you have to move out.
And just a question, in the Coronado area,
Yes, sir.
now, are there areas in the Coronado area that they could, submit paperwork to see if they could get them out of the flood deal there, or is all the Coronado area just automatically?
Most of the Coronado area, as I recall from what I've been working on for the Ephraim Canyon project, I can't recall any structure in there that is close enough to be able to submit paperwork for what would be called a letter of map amendment to get them out of the floodplain. And that's just because the way the floodplain is contained. Now, if the Ephraim Canyon project that we've been trying to get funding for a couple of years now can go through, that would remove almost 95% of the buildings in the Coronado area from the floodplain.
And now, in the Monte Carlo area, are most of those houses?
Most of those are out.
Most of them are out of the
Most of those are out because of the effects of the Monte Carlo basin. So this just goes through and continues talking about some of the requirements if a house is destroyed in the floodway and they wish to rebuild. Section 512 is the current section of our ordinance that deals with riparian habitat, and this was just modified because some of the stuff is a little overburdensome, we think, for the property owners. So if you have a house in the Tubac area, for example, you're near the Santa Cruz River, in the riparian forest of the Santa Cruz, if you want to build a fire safe zone around your house, you have to cut down the vegetation around the house. Well, in order to do that, I have to give a permit, and under the way the ordinance is written, I also have to require you to mitigate that disturbance by replanting the vegetation, which is counterintuitive to protecting the building from fire. So in consultation with several of the fire departments and the National Forest Service, we came up with a definition for a wildfire protection zone that a building can clear upwards of 30 feet away from the edge of the structure, completely clear the ground in that, and then from 30 feet to 125 feet, they're allowed to thin, remove, excuse me, remove, deaden down, or thin the forest out to give them that protection zone. 3 weeks weren't enough for this cough. Then it also just refers back. I've got one here. It's a tickle right now. It refers back to section 5.5M for new developments. That those are the requirements for that they would have to meet for riparian habitat. And then we added section 513 of the ordinance, which is to incorporate the standard of or the language of a standard we've had since 2001, which requires critical facilities and critical services to be either outside the 500-year floodplain, or if they're inside the 500-year floodplain, protected from the 500-year event, so that those critical facilities and services can remain safe during a flood event and can return to work very quickly after a flood and not be out of commission. I don't know those of you that remember the 1983 flood event in the Rio Rico area. The Rio Rico fire station was under 2 feet of water. They couldn't respond to anything because their equipment was underwater. So that fire station was actually out of service for quite some time until the water drained, the bridges could be rebuilt, and people could actually get to the fire station again.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Hayes, how does in that particular discussion there, 500 years, how does climate change impact that 500 years and what's happening?
You know, that's a really good question, and it's one I'm not sure how to answer. And the reason for that is, part of the problem is that floodplain mapping and flood hydrology in some ways is almost as much of an art as it is a science, because if you look at the mathematics of the situation, we base how much water comes down to the watershed based on what we call the 100-year event rainfall. In order to know within a reasonable amount of certainty what that rainfall event should be, we need about 800 years worth of data on rainfall. And this is not including climate change. This is just, we need 800 years worth of data. We have, at best, maybe 30 here. So we've had events here where you might remember in 2005, that large thunderstorm that developed in Rio Rico ran north along I-19, caused the flooding of of I-19 at Chavez Siding. About 18 inches of water across the highway at Chavez Siding. That storm event is a storm event that dropped about 5 inches of rain in an hour. According to the statistics put forth by NOAA, that's an event that has a 1 in 165,000 chance of occurring any given year. My problem is I know for a fact we get up to 5 of those every year in the county. So how can that be 1 in 165,000? Most of the time they happen near the peaks of the mountains. So when that water runs out, it has time to attenuate, to soak into the ground, and it's not a problem. It's only really a problem if it hits the populated areas or near a populated area. But if we know that they're happening more often, it's kind of hard to tell. Now, climate change means that we should see even greater events over time. So you can imagine the problem of uncertainty when we don't even know what the 100-year event really is going to be. I mean, we take the 83 event on the Santa Cruz River, that was considered a 100-year event in 1983. In 1990, when they done some restudies and included that data set into the data, it was declared to be a 75-year event. By 1994, after the floods of 90 and 93 were included, it became a 50-year event, which means that the probability of that event went from 1% in any given year to 2% any given year. And that's just adding 3 additional floods into the data set. So unfortunately, I don't know how to honestly answer that question, except to say that, again, hearkening back to some of the stuff that I believe we've discussed here before with the council on some of the plans that we have for the city of Nogales in terms of flood control basins, that those are being designed to handle what is considered a 500-year event now. So hopefully, assuming we can find a way to get the feds to give us the funding for them, we can provide that sort of protection for the city.
Thank you.
Councilman Verona, you know, Mr. Haresian could probably answer that one.
Yes.
The 800 one? The 100 year?
No, the climate change one.
Mr. Haresian is 500 years behind the times.
Mr. Verona, liberal-minded situation always sees cold where there's hot and hot where there's cold, so what can I say?
I figure I'd throw a little curve.
No problem.
It happens in this council.
So with that, if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mr. Mayor, just
Yes, go ahead.
just 2 concerns I have. First, on Morley Avenue, you had mentioned prior that there was a concern of the flooding of Morley Avenue, so the businesses on Morley Avenue could get a better rate on their flood control insurance. About the water that's coming from Nogales, Sonora, and has the ability to knock down that border fencing right now, or border wall, as some would allude to, and the water coming across. Have you done something to, you said that you were going to do something to create something there so that the people would get better rates on
That's where the remapping that we're looking at, that we're working on, is going to come from. Like I said, we're working on doing a restudy of how much water comes across the line. When we did the mapping originally, starting in 2006, FEMA gave us the discharge to use for the Nogales wash. They got that from the Army Corps of Engineers. A few years after the mapping was done, I found a report from the Army Corps of Engineers that listed that discharge. And it listed that discharge, it gave the value of that discharge, and then proceeded to say, and I quote, that it was based on a statistical average of similar sized watersheds in other regions of the country, end quote. Which means they didn't actually do the science on it. So the amount of water that we have coming across, nobody's actually done the real hard math calculations. So one of the things that happens is, as we've already touched on briefly, as a area urbanizes, you get more runoff. That usually means you get bigger floods, more water coming down. But in the instance of the city of Nogales, Sonora, they've also, for all intents and purposes, obliterated the flow path of the water. So now the water has to find its way, it has to meander its way through those buildings. And sometimes it's actually having to flow uphill to get around buildings. And that might have the effect, we think, of lowering the discharge. It won't, the total volume of water will still be increased, but the peak amount that can come through at any one time might actually, we think, is actually dropped because of that. And so once we get that done, we're flying some LiDAR topography in Nogales. I believe that may have actually already been flown, but that's being done to look at this so we can figure out these flow paths and figure out how much water is really coming down. And then once we get that, we also might look at using a newer methodology for mapping called two-dimensional mapping to try to get a better handle on where the water is actually flowing. The only issue with that is that while FEMA has accepted that mapping methodology, and we have a letter now from them saying that we can use it, they don't accept it for mapping floodways. And since the Nogales Wash has a floodway, we'll have to figure out how to remap the floodway with more traditional methodologies that FEMA uses, because they're stuck in the mindset that you define a floodway by taking the sides of the floodplain and squeezing it in until the the depth increases by 1 foot at some point in the area that you're studying. Whereas in the two-dimensional model, we can make the floodway really what it is. If you've ever looked at a major wash, not the confined Nogales wash, but like the Santa Cruz River when it's in flood stage, or any larger river that's in flood stage, you'll notice that the center of the river is actually slightly lower than the edges of the river. And that's the area where the vast majority of the mass and energy of the system is actually at. And that's what we should really define the floodway as. And so we could do it as a momentum equation, which would give us an even better, more controlled floodway, because then it's going to be confined to those open spaces where the water can run, like the railroad tracks, like Grand Avenue, like Morley, and the buildings come out of that.
That would be very helpful.
So, but you know, we're working on it. We'll see what happens. More work is going to be done this year. We anticipate coming back at some point in the future to discuss the results of that.
May I ask my second concern?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Hayes, you made an interesting statement when you were talking about those sections that are AE, and so my question is, I'm trying to get a view is, I get the view that there's very limited land within proper city of Nogales to really build. So if we were to annex up to, let's say, Peña Blanca Road,
Okay.
would we still be with that problem, or is the flood control there more reasonable that a developer can go out there and say, I want to build 100 homes, it's less restrictive than what's required in actual city of Nogales right now?
Generally speaking, there are some areas there that would be restrictive, but those are down in the lowlands, the flat lowlands between the hills, and realistically speaking, we're trying to convince developers that have looked at those areas in the past to go up onto the hills, leave that bottom land alone, because the requirements to go through and have to deal with that are going to be so onerous. The cost of insurance, especially if it's commercial industrial developments, we had somebody came in that bought one of the warehouses off of Baffert a while back, and they got their flood insurance bill to $64,000 a year. It's unsustainable. But there is land out that way. It just depends on the parcel that they're looking at.
And Mr. Hayes, my final concern, Mayor, if I may, what I noticed about how you build this committee, and I'm glad you built it, and it was balanced between the county and the city. I don't know what individuals were on it, but what if we have people in the city of Nogales that have some concerns, and they come over to us that aren't getting favorable treatment from the county, and they would like help from the mayor and council to intercede? And is there something that we can do as a group to put more emphasis on their concern, so that you know that we also want to lead some credence to their position?
One of the things I would strongly suggest is forwarding their concerns, at least to me, if not their information, at least just the concern, so that can be taken into account. Right now, we're doing this to gather the public input and comments on it, so we can then take that input, consider it, and create a final draft for the ordinance. And my plan right now is, I'm not sure when in August, but sometime in August, because I'm still trying to find out when I have to take my son back to college, is to have another round of public meetings like we had back on the 4th and 6th of June to elicit public comment and review.
So when you do the final, I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes, when you do the final draft, are you going to come back and tell us this is the final draft that's going to be presented?
I sure
to the
can.
board? Mayor, could you please request that they come back, so that at that time, if there's developers or anybody within the city of Nogales, that they can come back and we can hear their voices at that time?
Yeah.
But we would want them to go through you first and then to come to us.
Yeah. And I can't remember if I had how many extra comment forms I had put out there, if there were any out there. But they're there. Please feel free to make extra copies of the form also for people if they want to comment. The presentation that I gave tonight, I actually created a video for that. That's been posted to YouTube and to our Facebook page. We also have on our website copies of not only the a PDF of the presentation, but the information packet that you got with the sheet listing out what the general changes are. A slightly different version of the comparison document, because it took me a while to figure out where in the new version of Word they hid the, remove the format changes from the comparison document. So, but that one has all the formatting changes in it. But that's also online, as well as just a clean drafted copy of the draft.
Mr. Mayor, could you please have the city manager place this on our website though too, so that they're aware of it? And if there's any concerns, that they can come so that we can.
And copy of PDF copy of what is on the website. Is on
Yeah,
here.
great. Thank you.
Thank you.
John,
Mayor?
one question, John. You mentioned the railroad tracks. I remember attending the meeting you had many years ago. That you said that the railroad tracks could not be used as a levee. Is that still in effect?
That is still in effect. That goes back to some of the original language of the federal codes in the National Flood Insurance Act, that for something to be considered a structure that will alter the floodplain and keep an area protected, that it has to meet a couple of different requirements. One, it has to be properly designed and meet the proper engineering standards. Two, and more importantly, and a bigger hurdle, it has to be publicly owned and publicly maintained. So, does the city want to own and maintain the railroad tracks? Because I know I don't want to have that responsibility.
Because sometimes it looks like it does that,
Yeah,
We do have some runoff in the certain sections of Grand Avenue just north of Baffert.
Yeah.
And you think it's coming out of the wash, but it's not. For what I understand, I think some of the drainage culverts are not designed properly.
There's a couple of areas where you could probably benefit from a backflow valve in the drainage where the water does come up because of the pressure. But I've also seen the water come through the tracks itself in that area too. So it's just a matter if the water gets high enough. But yeah, that's something that could easily be looked at. Just a one-way valve, one-way butterfly valve type of valve that would let the water drain towards the wash, but not let the water back up.
Yeah, because we were talking to ADOT, Mr. Guerra and John. We went to a meeting in Tucson, and we discussed that because it's their culvert, and it's designed a certain way that it's not to get, basically when the water level in the wash is high enough for the culvert, it doesn't allow the water on the road to go out. It kind of pushes it back onto the road.
And one of the things they could also do with that is consider the angle of the culvert.
Yeah.
If you angle the culvert slightly downstream, then the wash will actually put a suction on the end of the culvert and suck that water out of it, instead of if you angle it, if you're at a right angle or slightly pointed upstream, that water pushes into the culvert and it's going to push out into the stream.
That's what we found out, that was a problem. But ADOT, as it is, they don't want to take responsibility for the culvert either. So, but that's yes, go ahead.
Is there anybody in the audience? I don't know if anybody wants to
say
say
anything
any
about
comments. Raymond?
No. They're here for that big one, Bell Road. John, thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just
Yes.
thank Mr. Hayes, Jennifer, the cooperation of coming over here and getting us involved and presenting things, and so we don't have to go there. Wish we could continue to work on this.
Thank you.
Mr. Hayes,
Go ahead.
by when would you want the
comments?
The comments,
ideally,
what's the time frame that works for
I'm
you?
probably looking early to mid-August. What I'm looking at right now. Again, like I said, I've got some personal issues I have to get into my schedule so I can figure out what availability I'll have. Because the next set of meetings, I'm going to try to do them all at night to make it easier for people to get to. So that's going to require me to be able to schedule those nights out in advance.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, number 2, presentation, Bell Road, 189 improvements. Mr. Guerra.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity for putting this in front of you to go over some of the benefits and also challenges that we have for the proposed connection of the road with Mariposa as preliminary presented by ADA. The cover sheet is showing the more or less a layout of the proposed connection that is aligned with Lomas Mariposa in the north, and this is the end of Bell Road, the private section. So it's like a little tiny section that where they want to connect. So I just put it in a list of things that you will be checking through the presentation. First of all is just the purpose of this presentation is to again tell you the opportunities that we can see and also the design challenges. As you know, this concept has been brought by local owners, local developers many years from now, since the General Plan 2010 and previous studies done within the city of Nogales. Another one was the Transportation Plan 2010, where the connection of the road with Mariposa was recommended by local owners, local developers as well. ADA is in the process of designing Mariposa, and by the way, by December this year, they will have a design team for design build team. It will be a combination of engineers and contractors to do the design and construction of the Mariposa. So they are, let's say, in a hurry to have a decision by the city of Nogales and local developers if we want to proceed with the connection.
But wait.
Yeah.
But when, Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
But when are they expecting us to give them a reply? Exactly, when are they expecting?
As soon as possible, because they need to let know the consultant
Right,
if this will be part of the process or not.
So as soon as possible is defined as what? Tell us so we know what to do.
Yeah, so they are, at this point, they are purchasing properties where they have to do something along the corridor. They are in the process of dealing with the owners. So they want to close out that phase, because December will be the date where they issued a contract to someone, I don't know whom. So they don't give me any date yet, but they said, Juan, please tell me soon. So that's why I requested the presentation to go over with this some of the details that I have to present you. And then, so after this meeting, we can, inform ADA as well with the inputs from Mayor and Council, the direction based on the local developers' input and also the issues that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
This is a functional road classification approved by the Federal Highway Administration in 2015. So technically, this is Bell Road. It's a little piece here. It's considered a local road right now. It's a dead end. And then Industrial Park Drive is considered a minor collector. Which is based on the number of traffic that passes through that road. So this is a vicinity map. This is Bell Road. There are two parts in Bell Road. As I don't know if some of you know that this yellow portion is the public portion of Bell Road, and then the rest of the road is private. And then including this connection here, which is named Mariposa Park Place. At the beginning, when this road, when this concept was brought to the attention of the city, the general plan was contemplating to connect the road right here, but this property was already sold. Now the idea is to connect it right here. So this is the proposed location of the connection. Just a little bit of history. Based on city records, the public section of Bell Road was constructed in 1984. At that time, the cross-section, the paving cross-section was 2 inches over 6, which is for a residential area, not for an industrial zone. And then lately, city crews have applied some overlays and constructed some valley gutters recently, just to provide a little bit of maintenance. And on the contrary, the private section was constructed according to our records in 2003, 2004, according to the as-built plans. So the section of the private section was, again, according to the plans. We don't have any kind of engineering or course or something to prove that this is the cross section. That is what is shown in the plans. 3 inches, 3.5 inches over 6. In 2016, I hired a consultant to make a road evaluation, a paving design for Bell Road, the public section, and the consultant gave me a recommendation to pave, to do 4 inches of AC over 9 inches of AB. AB means aggregate base, of course, and then or alternative would be 9.5 inches of Portland cement concrete. This is for Bell Road public section. In the intersection of Bell Road and Industrial Park Drive, they recommended 7 inches of AC over 12 AB or 11.5 inches of Portland cement concrete in a similar way that was done on the Industrial Park Avenue. That's the portion that we did. In 2012, Mr. Michael Capin approached us and to learn about the code requirements. We provided a list of requirements for the dedication of the private section of Bell Road, but we never heard back from them if they didn't proceed with the dedication. This is the as-built plans. I just wanted to show a closer view of the proposed. This is the section that was constructed. This is Industrial Park Drive. This is Bell Road public, and this is where it starts the private section. Somewhere here. It's about 1,200 feet, more or less.
All the way to 189, 1,200 feet to 189?
189 is somewhere here. So this is Industrial Park Drive. This is somewhere here.
No, but I mean, they want to make a connection from the end of the public road going to 189 to hook up to 189, correct?
No, they want to make the connection in the private section. This is I'm showing just the private section. Yeah. So this is just like 50% of the road.
See, so, no, I understand that.
Go back to the other map where it's more
the
visible.
beginning. Yeah.
But just a point here, Dr. Felix. This is the problem, that when you have somebody make a presentation and we don't have that presentation ahead of to study, to review, to prepare ourselves, that's what happens. I've asked you several times that when they make a presentation, our staff, to give us a copy of the presentation so we can study and come prepared. Now, what I'm trying to, if I may, Mayor,
Go ahead.
What I'm trying to do is find out from the private part, well, maybe you need to show me on another map so I'm clear. You see where that red is, that connection, how far is it from the public to the private? Is that the 1,200 feet that you're talking about?
Yes, sir. This is between this is about 1,100 feet, and this is 1,200 feet, something like that.
Okay.
So it's more or less the same distance.
So what is the state ADOT saying to us that they need to have a decision on, so that we can have, if I recall right, the connection there to 189, weren't they gonna have some kind of traffic signals or something?
Yes, that's correct. Right here, part of the improvement includes a traffic signal right here.
But Juan, I thought that was approval. We were talking about this way back when. They said that was approved. Why did they take it out?
Yeah. When they
At all those hearings we went to, they said there's gonna be traffic lights there.
yeah.
Now you're telling me they're not gonna be there. Why?
Yeah, what happened is this, they asked me to provide the concrete section or the paving cross section for the connection right here.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I told ADA is that if they are doing this, this is a private section, so they can, this is not dedicated to the city, and then this portion is in a very dilapidated way. We need to reconstruct this. And then if they put more traffic here, this will change. Right now it's a dead end. Once this is open, this will create another scenario right here. So what I told ADA is that they need to provide to go farther and not only make the connection, but go farther and do the whole improvement also inner side, and then dedicate it to the city. But they said no, we cannot go farther than this area. So just here.
So
Just the red part.
Just the red part.
but the red part is public or private?
It's private.
So we have to, are you saying that we have to take possession of that for them to do that red part?
That is correct. What they are willing to do is they improve this area,
Mm-hmm.
and then one of the conversations from the local owners is to give this portion to the city, and then this cannot be given to private owners. It's because they are using federal funding, needs to be maintained and give it to local government.
So then, are you saying that in order to meet the requirements of ADOT, that we would have to give, the mayor would have to give some kind of direction to the city manager to say that we are willing to take over that red part section?
Yes, sir.
But if, excuse me, but if we were not, if there was no traffic light, we're talking about things, again, that we've already, I thought were already cleared up. If there's no traffic light there, that means that before that, that other entrance, the one in the middle, right past the yellow, right there, that entrance to the I-189. So that means then that everybody on both of those sections would have to get those vehicles out that want to go south. They're going to have to make a right-hand turn and to get back to go.
That is
south?
correct. In the next slides, I will show you the proposed circulation by ADA. I will show you the proposed circulation.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
I have a question. The red section, if the city was to take possession of that land, ADOT would do the actual build-up on that
That is correct.
with their funds?
Yes.
And-
Just the red portion.
Just the red portion?
You see, Mayor,
The other portion would have to be done privately?
Excuse me?
The other part there, the yellow part
Uh-huh.
is one section. Now, the other part that is privately owned,
Right.
that would have to be done by the people who own it?
Yes, sir.
And then dedicated to the city, if done to our specs?
Right, you are correct.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, so then originally when we went through all of these discussions and the red portion there, did ADOT tell us, okay, did they make the assumption that the red was a public road?
No, they knew that since the beginning that this was, I remember that since when they had the preliminary meetings about I told them, hey, what is going on with the rest of Bell Road? Because you are just putting traffic on us and in a road that is already in a bad shape.
Right.
So what are you doing about it? And at that time they said that they might be able to reconstruct the whole section of Bell Road to make the loop. But they back up, say, no, we cannot invest right there. It's your deal.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. So this is the private section, excuse me, the public, 2 inches over 6 with overlays. This is the private section where, as you can see here, at the beginning, this was just like one block. This is the public portion of Bell Road. This was designed as a channel to carry all the water. This is mapped as a flat way. And then in order to develop these areas and then remove these vacant properties from the floodway. So that was the intent. According to the design cross-section, this is what was presented. The road in some areas has over 2 feet of water, based on the maps. If you go there, you will see that at the edges of the road or behind the curb, there are like a slope section with gravel riprap. That is technically a channel to carry all the water. So I found this interesting definition from FEMA for things that are mapped in the floodway with over 2 feet of water. According to FEMA, 6 inches of water will be enough to move any passenger car. 1 foot of water will float many vehicles, and then 2 feet will any kind of vehicle. We saw that on Western Avenue. So
I saw that.
So this is a copy of the map floodway. This is part of our GIS system. It's technically the same thing that is adopted by FEMA. So where the floodway is all contained within the road. So floodway is where the maximum velocities are, and it's concentrated right there. Another thing that I didn't mention is that the private section of Bell Road is only 40 feet wide. Our city development code requires 50 for a local road. For industrial, we are talking of, if this will be converted into a minor collector, the code requires 100 feet of right of way. So that is another issue that we see. In average, it's 1.8, but there are places where it's over 2 feet.
Mayor, may I?
Go ahead, Councilman.
So what's the solution for that?
Oops.
I mean, if you know there's a problem there, what's the solution?
Councilman, there could be many solutions. One of them could be maybe upstream basins.
But a solution that you would come to the mayor and the council with?
Well, at this point, I would have to, you know, if mayor and council decides to move forward with this project, it's when I have to, you know, start, you know, maybe thinking about hiring an engineering consultant. If we have to improve the road, if we have to do some kind of basin, I don't know. It depends the direction. But if, you know,
But
Go ahead, Councilman.
But are we just talking about the red part, or we're talking
this is
about
the
all
whole,
of Bell
the whole
Road?
thing, the whole,
Okay.
the
Now-
private.
Now, you said part of Bell Road is public,
Yes, sir. Yes.
and part of it is private.
That is correct.
So would this involve a private-public
Partnership.
partnership to be ahead and do the whole thing, or what are we discussing then?
Well, if the
Because ADOT has said they're not gonna do it. They would do the red part.
exactly.
They would do the red part if we take possession.
That is correct.
So they would do that red part. Then the rest of the part is what we're discussing.
You are correct.
And there's a problem there because of the water?
Not only the water, also I will show you the geometry of the proposed connection.
Councilman, well, excuse me, Juan.
Yes.
The way I look at it, Juan, I see ADOT impacting traffic. See or no?
Yes, sir.
When somebody impacts traffic, what is our concern? They help with fixing that road
Yeah.
and making that road, I mean, at least usable, because it's going to be heavy traffic, Juan. It's not just going to be a loop for cars.
It's a combination of, yeah.
You're going to have heavy traffic of trucks, and and it's for the circulation of traffic, right? So ADOT's using and making that red mark there, part of that intersection, and to alleviate the traffic. See? Or not?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
If that's the case, why are we addressing it to ADOT, and they have to be on top of this and help us out on this? Because you put that situation on us, that burden to not only improve our side of it, but to help the private sector. That's gonna cost us, and it's gonna cost the private sector. ADOT is the one doing the flyover. ADOT is the one impacting the traffic on Mariposa Road. ADOT is the one impacting the traffic on Bell Road. ADOT needs to be on top of this. I think again, it's that easy.
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
I want to address your comments because I agree with your comments completely. But what I'm afraid of is what Mr. Guerra is alluding to, that we have a narrow time frame to make a decision. And I don't think that question is going to be answered by ADOT, okay? So what I see here is that we have to, at least right now, get that red section and the city take over it so we can have the intersection lights and traffic
I
lights
understand.
put in place to make a decision. And then on that one, if whoever the owner of that property is willing to give it to us, or we work in a partnership with him. But all of that is vehicles. I would think the majority are vehicles where we get overweight fees from. So we want to keep that industry there on those roads, because we do get money from them that we can use. But for right now, Juan, I for one favor that we support, Mayor, giving direction that we take. Who owns that property, the red section?
Mr. Capin, I guess.
Is he willing to give us that property?
He mentioned that he's willing to work with ADA to make it this happen.
Well, we need to show good business, because our business is hurting, that we're willing to participate in this and take over that piece of property so it can become private, and we want it donated to us, and then tell ADA we own that, put in the traffic signals, and then we can give one more time to go ahead and let's fix the road and get the rest of the road that we need.
I would like.
But ADOT did say the red part again, they're willing to do the paving and they're willing to do all that?
Yes, just this blue, this
So
gray,
it would
gray
basically
section.
it wouldn't be a costing to the city.
No.
No, not
So,
that.
yeah, I think it's kind of
I
a
understand,
no-brainer for
but
that section there.
we're still gonna need a traffic circulation study on that.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Because, I mean,
yes.
we can have that little piece there, but how long is it gonna take for the rest of the road to deteriorate?
sure.
You know, are we willing to invest on that?
Well,
We
then,
have
like
to.
you said, we gotta get
wanna
together with ADOT then and see what ADOT's gonna do about it. What is
Yeah.
their proposal?
They already said that they didn't want
One of their arguments is they said that at this phase they cannot do anything at all because the federal money is just focused for the what they call the environmental map or limits, and magically the environmental map ends right there, right here. So they cannot do anything else 1 inch after this area. So they cannot. That's another reason why they cannot touch Bell Road at this point. They are using federal money. What I wanted to mention is that even with the connection or without the connection, this will be a traffic signal no matter what, for allowing the Lomas Mariposa to be connected and be safely accessing Mariposa. So the traffic signal will be there anyway.
okay, it'll be there, but there won't be any way for people to get those trucks in that area to go there and make a left-hand turn.
I will show you in the next slides the circulation.
Well, yeah, you're gonna show it to me, but still, if the traffic lights are there and we don't take over that property, that roadway, they're not gonna fix it. So you're gonna have traffic signals there, but there's gonna be no way for them to get out.
That is correct. But I will show you that in the next slides. So this is one of the challenge that I see too narrow angle here. Is a very short distance. What they are proposing is about 186 feet of radius. The code requires 350 feet, so minimum for a minor collector. So this is too narrow here. Another big issue that I see is that from point A to point B, there are 12 feet of difference, and the total distance between point A and point B is 175 feet. minimum by code, by ASHTO and other regulations, at minimum 100 feet needs to be at 2% for every intersection. So that means that the remaining 75 feet will have a drop of 10 feet. So that's another situation that exactly the location where they are proposing is not physically or the geometry is not adequate.
But ADOT's gonna take care of that.
Well, no.
Well,
ADOT
in
will
that
make that
section there,
connection.
that drop of 12 feet,
Yeah.
that's ADOT's responsibility.
Correct.
That's not our responsibility.
Exactly.
Now, we'll have to do something from the 3840 beyond that, but that section, what happens there, that's ADOT's responsibility.
They will build it, but they don't have any other way to make it better. So something to consider. They will build it based on whatever they have. But
So, Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
so what are you saying? ADOT would build it, but then we have a big problem anyway?
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
It's gonna be a,
So what good
gonna be a slope.
is it doing it?
So maybe, the connection with Mariposa is a beautiful, in concept. It's a good thing in concept, but right there, the location is not physically adequate. That's mine.
Is there another location we can use then? Well, how about where it is now, over the other?
The one where the tire shop is.
Yeah.
That will remain.
Yeah, but can we use it so they can make a left turn and have street, and have traffic lights there?
No, because the ramp will be in front of that.
that's where the ramp starts.
Okay, so if the ramp is gonna start there, and you're trying to tell us that there's a 12-foot drop there, I'm not willing to say that we're not gonna do nothing. When we have all of these vehicles there, that we're gonna create a jam over there in front of the IHOP for everybody to make a left-hand turn there, and then we're gonna have to bring the vehicles, they're gonna go up to the gas station there to start making a right-hand turn, and we're gonna pile up more traffic over there.
This is the circulation.
You're not giving us the consequences of making a no decision,
Okay.
though, either.
Hold on. So this is,
Yeah, but we're not looking at the consequences of a yes decision either.
Well, yeah, we are here. Right
yeah. This is the private section of Bell Road. This is Mariposa Far Place,
now. Where's the tire shop?
right here, this one.
Okay, now I know, okay.
Okay. So they will, right here will be right in, right out, right here.
Mm-hmm.
Next, the next slide, I'm showing that. So if anyone on Bell Road wants to go to Mexico, potentially they can go to Industrial Park Drive and make a left turn right here in the intersection, under the bridge. So they will have the option to go to Mexico as it is now. They also can go to Tucson, under the bridge, under the flyover. So for the existing businesses, they will have the option to go out, go
In and out.
right in and right out, and then also make a U-turn here and then another U-turn on the other traffic signal on Lomas Mariposa if they want to return. So for the restaurant in the corner, they will have the same situation. They will not be affected at all. So this is the other intersection where if they want to go to Tucson, they can use the existing, that will remain. They will not be blocked.
I'm not worried about Tucson. I'm worried about how safely, without creating congestion, when we're spending all of this money, are these trucks that are there right now, instead of going to the traffic signal and making a left-hand turn, having to come all the way back and circulate themselves again, and creating more traffic.
Well, remember that the trucks that are used to create congestion going just directly to Tucson, they will not cause any more trouble because they will be taking the flyover. So the reduction in traffic will be significant.
But not going to the south.
They will increase the number of travel lanes as well on both sides. They will have more capacity on both sides.
So what are you saying, then? It would be better for them to go ahead and fix that other section that's already there by the tire company? Is that what you're saying? We're better off there?
No. What I was trying to show here that the local businesses on Bell Road will not be blocked at all. If they want to go to Mexico, they have the freedom to go to this intersection where always has been. They will have access to Mexico or to Tucson.
That's a McDonald's intersection, or I mean the IHOP?
Yes.
Yeah. Is there Is there property there where more industry can be built there? In that section where the red section is there? Where people can purchase property and build some industry there? Where they would bring in more semis?
Where do you mean, on Bell Road?
Yeah, on Bell Road, where the red is there.
Yeah. Or in the corner?
Yeah,
Well, this is mapped as a flat way, flat plane, I guess. It's a,
not that
No,
red,
no.
Tucson.
Bell Road going towards, where UPS is at.
Okay.
There's only one property.
there are a few open
One.
spaces there,
There's one
mainly
big
for maybe offices or something, not enough for maybe
Not for trucks.
a warehouse. So it's a, let's say, local road with no, if nothing happened, no more expected traffic than what it is now.
So what's the suggestion?
Well, based on, these are the opportunities here. Arizona Department of Transportation is willing to pay for the connection, just the connection. That's one good thing. The second is that, the property owner, Michael Capin, is willing to donate, whatever he can there, he owns. Mr. Capin has expressed interest dedicating the portion of the private section. We have not, he is aware of the challenges that he has by having 40 feet only to comply with 80. I don't know how it will happen. And then the flat way, I don't know how, if he can, they can create something upstream. I don't know. There is a development going on right now as we speak. In the west side of, at the end of the road, but you need to cross through the Mr. Capin property. A warehouse is coming, but what they are proposing is to construct a warehouse and then channelize the flatway. But what they are doing, and technically they will be discharging still more concentrated on Bell Road. So right where we are having the proposed connection. So I really see another situation coming ahead. So this is another benefit. The connection provides obviously a new optional route. It's good for commercial and passenger vehicles. The properties, the few properties, there are not many, located, the vacant properties, if they would increase their market value, they have opportunities to put a business there with more success. And then the connection is in accordance with the 2010 general plan. This idea has been, suggested before, so that's another good thing that if happened. So on the other side, from an engineering standpoint, so the entire road is mapped as a flatway. You were hearing John Hayes to see that that's not optional. And then the right-of-way is limited to 40 feet with construction already. I don't know if he willing to, buy again the storage that is there to demolish it and bring it, put it to current standard, to current code. The geometry and the cross-section for a minor collector is inadequate. So that means that we have to reconstruct the whole thing. So ADA will not pay for any improvement on Bell Road. So that's another thing that we have to think how to do it. I have no idea how much it will cost to do a nice job on Bell Road, but I'm just guessing based on what it costs Industrial Park Drive. This project will cost over $2 million just to improve it.
Way over 2 million.
Based on existing conditions, the total reconstruction of the road, public and private, is needed to handle expected increase. So no questions about that. That once it's open, will bring more traffic. It's very probable that a traffic signal will be also needed at the other intersection with Industrial Park Drive because more traffic needs to be handled properly. Some of the existing warehouses use the road for truck maneuvering. You see that every single day. So they block the road entirely, and sometimes drivers don't see what is going on. Limited side visibility at the intersection with Industrial Park Drive. The way that it is, the road is like an arrow. When you stop there, you don't see much a long distance. So that's why I also think that a traffic signal will be needed to control the traffic there.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
So if we can't get the expansion to the 60 feet there or the 40 feet, are we still going to be able to go ahead with the project?
Well, that's a good question because that's something that I don't know. I cannot change the code, but Mayor and Council can make maybe make an exception to allow something, an industrial area to be only 40 feet. I don't know. It's not safe, I think.
40 feet is right now the
width of
public
the road.
Bell Road, right? That's 40 feet?
The public is 60,
It's 60.
and then it narrows to 40. ADA is proposing 80. So anyway, ADA is under, not according to code.
Right.
Anyway, it needs to be 100. So another thing is the utilities. There are many utilities that needs to be relocated: water, sewer, electricity. There are no sidewalks. There are pedestrians there. The code doesn't require sidewalks. Unfortunately, the code for industrial areas do not require sidewalks. But maybe for when we talk about a minor collector, requires sidewalks. So sidewalks needs to be constructed. There are no room for sidewalks. Significant difference in elevation. I mentioned that before. Access conflict with the properties at the end of the road. That is UPS. That once the connection is there, UPS will be a conflict because they are in a hurry always, and then will be like another intersection right there at the end of the road. There is no storm sewer. Everything runs on the road. Street lighting might require to be updated. There are few street lights, not enough. Yeah. So then another portion that is private is in 2016, the Mariposa Park Place is shown as a private property owned by Mr. Capey. That's something that he will have to donate or sell to ADA or to the city. As a new minor collector, this is important. As a new minor collector, the road needs to be designed for a level of service A or B. That means no delays, no safety at all levels. So the way that it is there is hard to make it work at level service A. Will be F or D or at the most. So these are some pictures of the current conditions. This is the intersection of Industrial Park Drive, and right behind the tracks is Bell Road. When you are approaching Bell Road, you don't see the cars coming out of. Excuse me. So this is the existing condition of an intersection. Right there, you see this is the intersection looking north, looking south. This is the right of way, the public, 40 plus 10 and 10 on each side. And then this is a truck backing up in one of the warehouses. Another one, another day. This is the division of the private and public. See the truck maneuvering and a lot of traffic over there. So where the parks are standing is a private property. That is the right of way in the public section, 40 feet. 40 feet. We are going to the point of connection. Right there. So that is the point of connection to 189. Again, looking in from another angle. We are talking about the flyway looking downstream. This is the point of connection looking upstream. You don't see Mariposa, but it's up. This is the other end. See the roof of the storages? It's 12 feet below. So in a short distance, you will have to go down.
Or build it all up, and then everything else would be on the bottom.
So with that, I'm ending my presentation, and I'm open for direction, questions.
Well, Mayor, I would like, we need to make some kind of what we want to do, because I don't want them to go out to bid and then we decide after that. But I would like for, have you made this presentation to Mr. Bell and Mr. Capon and people there to?
No, sir. I have expressed my concerns to them in public meetings with ADA and them, in different meetings, personally face-to-face meetings, and I have told them all my concerns. They are aware, but they don't consider that our problem.
Did ADA consider those are problems?
They just quit from the connection. Let me tell you why. Because they are not showing in the latest map that they showed me last week. They are not showing the connection. And then, as an excuse, they said we cannot touch that area, one, because it's not in the environmental, because I have been pushing to ADA to include the whole improvement along the road if they want to do this. They said they cannot. So
That would be helpful.
that would be helpful if ADA do the whole thing and they take care of, if they have to condemn properties or make it wider, make it safer, I don't know, encase the channel, I don't know, it's something, but it will be costing. That's why they.
So so if ADOT does that, are we gonna inherit that problem?
That's correct. If ADA is not doing anything other than the connection, we'll have to find money to resolve the issue.
There's no
Mr.
point.
Mayor, if I can
Yes. Go
respond
ahead,
to
Mr.
your
Mayor.
question.
Yes, go ahead.
Right now, it's a private road, as Mr. Guerra has been emphasizing over and over again. And so how that road was built was by a private developer and didn't go through a subdivision process, didn't seek, plan review and approval of the city. So basically, the private developer builds a road on his private property. So when he splits the property, which there's been multiple splits, and if it involves a road, which it has involved a road a couple of different times, according to state law, he's supposed to go through a subdivision process. That didn't happen. So we're talking about a road that exists by the unilateral action of the developer. And I see that the council is here saying we want to be part of a solution, but the problem was created by one developer. And so, and our code says for him, and what state law told him to do, was to come through a subdivision process and meet the demands of the subdivision code, and that wasn't done.
And who's that owner?
I
The developer?
think the owner is called Cape and Hill Properties LLC. From my research at the assessor's office, and I can share that research with you, Cape and Hill Properties bought this very large parcel in 1999 from a Pucci bankruptcy. Bought it out of Pucci property in a bankruptcy, and it has been splitting it since then. And part of the splits included creating a road. Well, a road means you have to go through a subdivision process to solve these problems ahead of time. That didn't happen here. So we are inheriting an environment that goes back to '99, and I think a most recent split occurred in 2008. And that was creating the part that was later developed into Mariposa Park Place. And even that one split, because it involved a road, should have gone through a subdivision process. So this is where we are because of the actions of a developer. And I see the council willing to be part of a solution, but there is no easy solution, as Juan has been pointing out over and over again. And so, if we put it on a future agenda for action on the part of the council, it's road liability for municipalities that can only police, nationwide, in tort payments. And so road liability is not a small thing. And so one way to avoid road liability in Arizona is if you make a decision at a policy level, then you can come under protection of what's called sovereign immunity. You are the sovereign body for the part of the government that's called the city of Nogales. And if you make a policy decision on this road, that may provide some liability protection in the future. But it would be firmly in your lap where everything is spelled out to you, the pros and the cons, and you make a policy to go forward anyway.
Oh, we still inherit it.
And then you inherit it, but by doing so, you may limit your liability exposure.
Well,
And I'm not saying that's a good thing, because it's going to create a need for a financial solution somewhere in the future, but you are the body that needs to make the decision as well.
That's a good point of clarification that you bring up, Mr. Messi.
Thank you, Mr. Messi.
But I would just like to see, Mr. Mayor, that there's some other consequences that have been alluded to, and like I heard Mr. Hennessy point out, Mr. Guerra says it'll probably be $2-3 million, but he didn't mention the sidewalks and everything, the street lighting, that, which probably take it up a little bit more.
Water, sewer.
But what I'd like to see is just have Mr. Guerra, Mr. Mayor, just go back and talk to them, explain it to them, and then have him get together with Dr. Felix and come up with what the talk is, and then come back to us. I just don't want to let this thing go with ADOT until we make a decision. So I don't want to turn our back on the business community, especially how business is in our community right now. But we want to help, we want to be positive, we want to find solutions, but we also want the business community to understand that there's a cost to us on this. Even though, you know, they help with the overweight fees and everything, but I want them to know that there is a potential cost more than what I thought. But I think if you could do that, Mr. Guerra, and then report back to the city manager and you let us know. But I want them to know that we are a business-friendly council, which we've been criticized that we haven't been, especially my first 2 years here. So,
Well, you know, thank you, Mr. Manuel. You know, and I feel the same way too, but this is where the business, the public-private situation that I've been talking about with incentives and waivers that maybe we could initiate. Because the worst thing about it is to inherit. I remember when we were discussing in my first administration the work we did on the sides, south side, the concrete, remember? That road was awash.
Yes, exactly.
And everything, all the water flowed into the wash that comes from the other side of the freeway. But you know, and I remember Mr. Machado working on that, trying to deal with that too, because paperwork indicated that it wasn't a city street for the longest time. And luckily there was overweight money that was used, I believe, on that after I left. But it all started in my administration, and I'm glad it did happen. We do have to help the industrial park. We do. But this maneuvering of trucks on the roadways is not a way of the future. Warehouses should have their own area to maneuver their trucks. Because you maneuver on the road, I'll give you a little story. When Walter Home was active, and when I was a fireman, we had to wait until they moved the trucks out of the way so we could respond to a fire. Because they were maneuvering on Grand Avenue. You remember, you were mayor at the time. And that's no, we can't allow that to happen anymore. So we need the space, they need the space, and that's why I was saying the traffic control or traffic circulation study by ADOT, which they're probably not going to do it because it's not their road, and they're not interested in that. They do want to make that intersection and help us out, but I know that once they do that, there's going to be traffic going in there. And then at that time, we're going to have to decide what we're going to do. So like Councilman Barona said, maybe you take it to them and talk to them what the future of this could mean. If they want to go public-private, and we're open for business, and let's discuss it. But it's not something that it's an easy thing to do. I don't see anything easy about this. You know, ADOT will make that return. Oh, ADOT loves making returns, but they'll stop right at the line. They'll stop right at the line, just like you said, Mr. Guerra.
You are correct, Mr. Mayor, and that's why I thank you for the opportunity of showing you all the pros and cons, because as a professional, my obligation is to open your eyes and see that it's not that easy. It's just...
Well, I noticed there were more cons than pros, way more.
Yeah.
So thank you for giving us this presentation, and we'll do the best you can with the property owners and with ADOT, and then we're going to bring it back and discuss it, and we'll do it soon so that you don't have this problem on your shoulders when ADOT comes knocking on your door. Okay. All right, thank you. Yes, Mr. Go ahead.
My name is Jim Barr, and my office is on Bell Road, so I have an interest in this. And I'd like to correct a couple of things that Juan had said. I was at those meetings with ADOT. Everything except for the yellow section needs to be owned by the city. Both the red and the uncolored area. yes, needs to be owned by the city for ADOT to make this connection. That's one point. Another one is if you don't do this traffic signal here, a lot of that traffic that would be using this half mile of Bell Road will instead use a mile and a half of industrial park. They'll go from IHOP to the Fiesta Market. And when they get to the Fiesta Market, there won't be a traffic signal there. There'll be a stop sign. You'll have the same situation that you have now, but more traffic, where you try and make a left turn at the Fiesta Market. This traffic signal is going to be a big help. Further down the line, this Bell Road connection connects into Lomas, Mariposas, and that will eventually go to Coronado School, to Meadow Hills, to Country Club, and to Grand. So it will provide a future west of I-19 north-south corridor that's really needed. Because right now, to get north-south from Mariposa Road, you need to take Frank Reed or Grand Avenue or one of the other, some other way. I mean, this traffic signal will help with the traffic on both sides of Mariposa. The third thing is on the floodplain. Right now, the existing portion is part of the floodway, and what happens now during a flood is that when it gets up to a certain point, the police department comes out and they put somebody by IHOP and they put somebody by somewhere west of there, usually not quite at Fiesta Market, but at Industrial Park Place and Industrial Park Avenue. So closing down that portion and closing down that extra 1,200 feet is not really a big deal. I mean, it would be all part of the same flood, if you will. It's just that where they close it will be a little bit different. The last thing is right now that private roadways 40 feet, the existing public-owned piece is 60 feet wide. The private piece is 40 feet. I would recommend that you acquire 60 feet of right-of-way for that 40-foot road. That's enough to do sidewalks. There's sidewalks on the public part. 60 feet of right-of-way is good for 3,000 vehicles a day, and I don't think you're going to exceed that. I mean, you'll have to do a study if you want, but I would recommend acquiring the 60 feet from Capon. Some of it will have to come from the property owners on the north side, and get that traffic signal in, because that's going to be a big help, and it'll save you in the long term on maintaining Industrial Park, which is an industrial road, and it's the same pavement section that Juan showed you, the 2/6, and it was always intended to be an industrial road. It's been there for 35 years. Better than a geotech report is an actual test, and that's what you have here. You have an actual pavement section with actual traffic. The only thing that it's really missing is regular maintenance. It should be chip sealed, or other things should be done regularly, and it will last a long time. But that really wasn't done, and that's why you've got the potholes that you have. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yes. You want to say something? Go ahead.
My name is Raymond Corey. I'm going to tell you what my interest is in getting that signal light there. I own the property at Martinez Funeral Home, and right now it's a right in, right out with a new design. So somebody coming from the Nogales side has to go way down Mariposa to go to the roundabout, which is way over there, turn around, fight with the trucks that are going to be in that area to come all the way back to the funeral home. Same deal with Donnie Smith, is my neighbor there, and the utility company, same deal. We can't get in. The ramp is going to block us all off. It's going to make life very difficult. Martinez has already said that, you know, if this happens and I can't get people into my property, I'm just going to have to leave Nogales or go somewhere else. And before, Adair had no competition, but now there's competition and prices are a little better, and everybody's going to die.
And I got my plans with him. You can't let him
He
go.
can be moved.
No,
Yeah. So
no,
that's
agreement,
my
no, I
interest.
no. You know, like, excuse me, like Councilman Barona said, it is important to get that intersection in there. You know, and I wish ADOT would have be a little bit considerate in something like this, knowing, you know, the millions of dollars they're going to be getting from the city, you know, just to help out also, and from the county to improve that flyover and the growth of Nogales and everything is impacted on that flyover, which is something positive. But you know, like Mr. Barr said, you know, all they have to do is give us that road, you know. But when you're giving us that road, but you give us the road, but we have to improve it. We have to make it wider. We have to make it stronger. You know, and so we're like, that's why I said, are we going to inherit the problem?
Well, one of the things that Mr. Guerra was showing was that the private road was made to higher standards than the existing public road.
Yeah.
There's 3.5 on 6.
Yeah.
The public is 2 on 6.
Yeah.
Now, one of the meetings I went to with ADOT, I found out that ADOT was unaware that Bell Road was private until here just recently. They found that out because they had talked about doing an improvement on Bell Road, thinking that it was public. But when they found out it was private, they said, all game's over. We
You know,
can't
maybe this conversation should have been done years
Couple
back,
years ago.
so that the city would have acquired that property and maybe done some work on it, so ADOT would have, you know, and I understand, and like Mr. Guerra said, you know, it's federal funds and it's, you know, it's an interstate, it's a different animal than just a regular state highway. But we do have to do something, and I know it's going to be a public-private situation, but we're going to work on it. It's not something we're just going to throw out. We're going to do something. We have to, you know, because I attended the meeting with them in Tucson, the last meeting, and ADOT is really tough to, when you start talking to them, they set their mind to certain things, and they're real tough to talk to. But I think we're going to have to do some. We have to set our minds to it too. So we're going to need their help in certain ways. But believe me, we'll solve this problem. Okay, it's not going to be just a no thing. We'll solve it. Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, what is your direction then, so I'm clear on the direction?
What, on this one?
Yes, what's going to be the direction?
My direction is to have Mr. Guerra sit down with Capen and Mr. Barr and everybody, and discuss this, find ways of how we can do it, and Mr. Massey also should be involved in this, because we need the legal side of the city, and bring it back to us as soon as possible so we can make a decision. You know, not a discussion, but an action item.
Okay,
so
that
we
would
can
be,
do that.
and even ADOT, if we could get ADOT to give us their.
Because if ADOT can do a little work, a little more work on that slope of Mariposa, that
12 feet is quite a bit.
Yeah, that could help out too.
Plus the approval of the, you know, the widening of the streets and all that, you know, how do they that are responsible for the ordinance and all that approve us?
Because by the looks of it, we're going to have three widths: ADOT, the private, and the public. So we have to fix that so it'll be one. Yeah. But we'll do that. Members of the council, on my discussion on annexation, I don't have enough time. 10 minutes. So I'm going to bring that one back, Mr. Massey, when we.
Yeah, if we can just better time, we should have started at 3, because this is a good discussion.
Yes.
I wanted to have. So if we could just get together, so we can start our study sessions at 3 o'clock. So we can get-
We're scheduled for a meeting,
On the July 16th.
the 16th. I'll place a discussion on annexation at the time.
We're gonna have that one at 3, could we have it earlier?
The one for the,
On the,
what was it, the 16th?
The 16th, that's a Tuesday.
I know, we're gonna have it in the morning, or what time
Yeah,
is it?
when, you guys going somewhere?
No,
They go the 17th.
the
17th.
17th, that's why we're having it on
And
the
I get-
16th.
And I actually have the arrival of the teams on the 16th, but I could manage.
Yeah, let's do it earlier. That's
Yeah,
no
early.
problem.
Doesn't make a difference
Yeah, let's do it.
every time.
For
As
me,
long as we can get
earlier the
everything
better,
taken
man.
care of at the time. All right, we'll take a 10-minute break. I'll adjourn this meeting. And